Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half this holiday weekend. I hope you had a good holiday, however you celebrated. Scott and I had a pretty laid back holiday. There was a kitten, so it wasn't that laid back. But, cuteness tends to open your heart a little bit, and kittens have a lot of cuteness. This morning, we are continuing in this series of From the Ground Up. We've done feet and ankles. We did lower leg last week. And now this week we're going to look at hamstrings. So hamstring muscles are the muscles on the back of your thigh. Maybe you know that. Some people like to call them hammies. It's a very cutesy name. I'm not always into the cutesy name, but some people like to call them your hammies. I call them the hamstrings. And those muscles are generally a little tricky because I think for many of us, we feel like our hamstrings are tight. And sometimes you do have a chronically tight hamstring that is very short. Sometimes your hamstring isn't all that tight, but it feels tight, but it has a really good amount of mobility and length and everything it's supposed to have. But there's this sense that it's tight. So a lot of us just have that sensation. And I work with dancers, and dancers will sometimes pull their leg really, really high and their legs like right next to their face. And they'll say, oh, my hamstrings are so tight. And you look at that logically and you go, what is that about? But I think it's that sensation. So why are the hamstrings so tight? Why do they feel so tight all the time? The short answer, or a short answer, is just that we do so much sitting. And that in that sitting position, we're often a little bit back behind our center, behind our pelvis, our sits bones, which stretches out, lengthens the lower back a little more, and makes the hamstring a little shorter. And then the hamstring ends up working to kind of hold you in place. It ends up kind of tense. So it is maybe tense, but it doesn't necessarily need to be stretched all the time. So we're going to look at working the hamstring, releasing the hamstring. What do those two things mean, and how do they relate to everything else? So let's figure out where that muscle is. So here's the lovely skeleton. Skeleton has a new stand, and so because it has this new nice stand, we're using the skeleton again more, and the other one was hard to wheel out. So he's facing forward right now. I'm going to turn him around so you see the back of the body. And then here are the sits bones on the skeleton down here. So ischial tuberosities, those bones right there, you could reach around and feel those on your body. You may have to lean forward a little bit to find them if you have a little more padding back there, but generally you can find those. And those sits bones are where the hamstrings start. Three muscles, your hamstrings, they all start on the sits bone. And then they go down the back of the thigh and attach all the way down below your knee joint. So they're going to cross two joints, your hip joint and your knee joint, which means they're going to act on both of those things, which is a little tricky sometimes in trying to release it and trying to feel it work. But we've got one on the lateral side, on the outside, one really deep, close to the bone, and then one that goes down the medial side, the inside part there. And so my hamstring is going to work to bend my knee, to flex my knee. And it's also going to work to extend my hip, to take my leg behind me. And as you can see on the skeleton right here, it doesn't go very far when you're really using the hamstring. There's just a little bit of hip extension for all of us. And that's just fine. And then the rest of it comes from the spine. His spine doesn't bend because he's got a rod in it, but it would come from your pelvis and your spine to take your leg farther back behind you. All right, so we have a sense of where those muscles are. I'm going to move the skeleton away. And then I've got a chair. Maybe you've got a chair. You could do this on the floor, but probably a little better to start this first exploration sitting up. And why? Because there's no pull on my hamstrings in a chair. If I'm on the floor, my leg is out in front of me. Because my leg is straight there, I've got to extend the hamstring a little bit more. So it just makes them a little tighter sometimes. So if I'm up on something, a block or a chair, and then I stop pulling on the hamstring, then I can feel it maneuver a little better. So like I said, for a lot of us, this is kind of where we sit. Me too, right? Maybe here. Scott's very tall, so I look over all the time and he's like this because I want to show this part right here of the side. if I can get that side view. Okay, so I think we're having some technical camera stuff. So this position right here, right? Hamstrings are a little short. Hip flexors look a little more open. Lower back looks a little more open. But none of this is terribly supported, right? So I'm going to come forward on my sits bones a little bit more. And then do just a little bit of back and forth. So rolling back, feel that down position. And then feeling your pelvis, maybe you can feel those bones. If you have a hard surface to sit on, then that's helpful. Rolling forward and then rolling the pelvis back and then rolling the pelvis forward. Now I might do this with no movement in the pelvis, right? I could go, oh, I'm slumped and I'm sitting up straight, I'm slumped and I'm sitting up straight without moving my pelvis at all. So it's really important that we're trying to move the pelvis and roll on the sits bones forward. Hamstring gets longer. And then roll back behind the sits bones. Hamstring gets a little shorter. And you might put your hands, I have my hands way down low on my sacrum and my pubic bone. Again, trying to assist my pelvis a little bit to come forward and then to assist it back a little bit. Now it could be that this is the harder position for you. Sometimes that's the case. Might be the forward position is a little harder. Just notice. And then next time you get into a more upright place on top of your sits bones, see if you can feel that. I like to think of it as being on the forward edge of my sits bones. So it's not just right on top, it's actually a little bit forward. And my tailbone is not really in the chair at all. It feels like my tail, if I were a cat or a dog, my tail could flip out behind me. I wouldn't have all that pressure on it. So just settled in here, a little forward of the sits bones. Now, sometimes this makes the hip flexors work a lot. And this is another reason the hamstrings can feel really tight. If they don't let go, the hip flexors have to work really hard to hold this position. If the hip flexors are really tight and not letting go, the hamstrings start to fight a little bit too. So they get a little back and forth. So we're going to think forward on the sits bones, relaxed through the hip flexor, and then instead of the hip flexors holding, a little bit of lower abdominal feeling, holding. And that creates a little length through the lower back. And the deep hip flexor muscle, the psoas, gets a little more length, a little more ease. So see if you can set up a sense of that posture. And then just breathe with it for a moment. I never said lift your chest, right? We're just looking at the pelvis right now. Let your chest be relaxed, your arms be relaxed. If it feels really tense in any of the places, just back off a little bit. See if you can find some ease while still stacking up the bones. And then see what you can feel on your chair. So that place where the sits bone is, knowing that the hamstring runs from the sits bone down to the back of the knee, thinking of that sits bone part of it a little bit more. Imagine just a little bit of space around there. A little bit of openness, a little bit of length in that upper part of the hamstring. And as that lets go, you just create a little bit of tone in the lower abdominals. Relax your chest, relax your hips. Okay, so we're going to take that image, that feeling, we're going to translate it to being on the floor, lying on your back. So we'll come off your chair, out of your seated position. And then we'll come into that same position lying on your back, right? Same basic position. Lying on your back, knees bent and feet flat on the floor. Now what happens to me is I lie on my back. I feel my pelvis want to tuck just a little bit. It's like that hamstring shortens that space I was talking about right at the sits bone. It wants to grab a little. My pelvis wants to tuck under a little. So I'm just gonna remember the space. Imagine my sits bones just floating towards my heels. I let my pelvis tilt a little bit again. I'm not forcing it, I'm just allowing the weight of my pelvis to let go, my pubic bone and inner thighs to let go. And then if you notice your back starts getting tight as you do that, well then, okay, back off. Maybe not that. Additionally, you may not have had that experience when you got on your back. You may have gotten on your back and felt like your lower back was really tight and your sits bones were way down. Whatever you do, relax towards the feeling you had sitting. See if you can allow your bones to find the feeling of the sits bones, just like easily, softly towards the heels. The tailbone really relaxed. It can just like release down. The lower back relaxed. And you might notice some effect on your hamstrings. You might not. But ask the question, what do your hamstrings feel like when you do this? My feeling is they feel just a little twitchy. They're just a little, they're kind of releasing and they're little like, almost like they want to twitch. It's not necessarily the right feeling, that's just what I'm noticing. So I'm a little more aware of them. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is really establish this position. Tone in the low belly. As the knee folds in, right knee folds in, try to leave your pelvis where it is. Like I said, my tendency would be for my pelvis to tuck as my leg comes up because the hamstring isn't letting go. You might have the opposite feeling, that you go into an arch. Doesn't really matter. You just try to keep your pelvis where it is. And then take the leg back down. Take a moment, reestablish what you know, and then low belly leaves the pelvis where it is, keeps it where it is. As the left leg comes up, as the left leg goes down, pelvis stays where it is, and then the other side moves. Hamstrings letting go as the leg comes up. And then as the leg goes down, right, it just kind of falls back into place. A little bit longer, a little tiny bit longer as the leg comes up. A little tiny bit shorter as the leg goes down. It's not like you're really working it at this point. We're not trying to do that right now. Just aware of it. And then again, if you notice your lower back, a little tighter each time, take a moment, let that go. A little deeper from your belly to float your leg up. Chest gets to let go. And then next time you have both legs down, leave them there. And a couple breaths here. So we're going to take your right leg straight out on the floor. Straight out on the floor. Remember I said the hamstring crosses the back of the knee? That asks the hamstring to lengthen to open the back of the knee. So I have a pretty long hamstring behind the knee. So the leg is out on the floor. We're going to do a knee fold with the left leg, belly support, nice open sits bone, stable pelvis. And then we're going to add in that idea of lengthening the hamstring to let the knee open up, right? Which would be towards straightening your leg But we're going to do it really gently with that image of the hamstring. So the hamstring fibers, they spread apart as my foot reaches up. I just have this nice easeful length. And then they just kind of fall back together, really easy. Let it float back together. So I'm not trying to push into a big stretch. I probably don't even feel a stretch. It's a different way of releasing the muscle. Imagine long ease, takes the lower leg up, and then release back down. Now, I'm not even straightening my legs. I'm just floating up and back down. Low belly supports. Hopefully pretty easy hip flexor. And that image of the hamstring fibers opening up. Maybe halfway to 2/3 of the way straight. About what you're getting to. And then next time you have the leg up, leave it there, take a couple breaths. Belly works. Sits bone, relaxed, tailbone relaxed. Easy lower back. Long back of the leg. And then release your leg. We're going to do the little test down on the floor, both legs open. How do your two legs feel after doing that? Not stretch, release for the hamstrings. So again, I'll give you my experience. It's not the right experience. It's just my experience to compare to. Right, my left hip that I just worked with. Right, if you're mirroring me, that hip feels more open. The leg feels heavier. The back of the knee feels heavier. The shin feels heavier. The foot feels heavier. It actually feels like the floor is a little lower there. And it feels like my leg falls open more easily. And even my lower back feels a little more relaxed on that side. So I didn't feel a hamstring stretch at all when I did that. But it seems like my hamstrings let go. All right, let's try the other leg. So bending the right knee, find your pelvis, settled, sits bones spacious, tailbone settled. Lower belly supports as the knee comes up over your hip. And then we've got these hamstrings, right? A little short with the knee bent. We're going to imagine they just glide apart about halfway to 2/3 of the way up. And then they just glide back together. That's it. Not pulling to a big stretch, just glide open. Glide back together. And the next time you're in the up position, stay there. Check in with your pelvis, your sits bone, your belly, your lower back. Easy released back of the leg. And then taking that leg down, both legs down. How do both legs feel on the floor? They feel more similar to me after doing that. And then bring yourself up to sitting. All right, so this is kind of warming up the hamstring to get it to like massage it a little bit to get it to let go. Now let's see if we can get it to work a little more. So talked about a couple ways they work. One way is to extend the front of the hip. So here, front of the hip, it's got an angle, it's in flexion, extension of the hip. There I just extended my knee, but my hip still has a little angle. Extending the hip, taking the leg up a little bit, right? Opening the front of the hip. So we're going to work with that first on your belly. hands under your forehead, and legs straight back behind you. Now remember with the skeleton, I was showing the thigh go back into hip extension, and it didn't go back very far to get the hamstring to come on. It's going to be true here too. We're not going to take the leg very high, because if I try to take the leg high, I'm going to have to move in my pelvis and my back to make that happen. It's not wrong, but it's not really doing much for my hamstring. It's not really about my hamstring there. So we're going to isolate it by keeping the movement kind of small. So first, just set up with your legs parallel. And then again, settle your pelvis into what feels like neutral, with some awareness of the sits bones, feeling kind of spacious, not grabbing or tightening around your tailbone. A little bit of support from your lower abdominals, which helps create a little support in your lower back. Lengthening the lower back without tightening your sits bones and tucking your pelvis, right? So a more subtle feeling of abdominals on and lower back long without moving the pelvis around. And then once you have that, you're going to press your foot down into the floor and see if you can extend your knee a little bit more. Like your knee straightens just a little bit more. Your kneecap floats off the floor. And then see if you can feel a little bit of hamstring work when you do that. I feel just a little more awareness in my hamstring. And then let that knee drop. Do that with the other side. The top of the foot pushes into the floor gently. The knee floats up, kneecap off the floor a little bit. You just start to get some of that hamstring feeling. Opens the front of the hip just a little more. Now, next time you have that position, you get a little sense of the hamstring, we're going to shift the focus. You're going to press your foot less, but keep trying to find that hamstring feeling, lengthening the back of the knee, floating your whole leg off the floor, but really long leg, really straight knee, and lifted belly. And then lower that leg all the way down. Try that same thing with the other side. Top of the foot presses a little into the floor. That extends your knee and lets your kneecap come off just a little off the floor without tucking your pelvis. And then you try to keep that sense of the hamstring floating your thigh off the floor. Really, really straight, long leg. And then back down. Play with that a couple times. Kitten likes this exercise. Yeah, and also the top of my head, so. Kitten is saying, head down on the mat, Collette. Now, keep going side to side. And even if you don't feel your hamstrings very much right away, you'll find it over time. Maybe you feel a little more belly or a little more sense of the lower back long. Maybe you're just getting that sense of length in the back of the knee. And next time you have one leg up, leave it there. And then take the second leg up to meet it. And both legs back down. One more time, starting with the other leg. And second leg up. And then both legs back down. And relax all that. And then roll on to one side. We're going to work with that same sort of feeling now lying on your side, just to see if you can get a sense of that. So feet come towards the front part of your mat. And then body along the back edge of your mat. You can keep your head down here. You can put your head up in your hand too. Either way is fine. It'll make a big difference for what we're going to do here. So have your top leg in line with your bottom leg, a little bit on that forward angle. And then in this position, a little like when you're sitting, sometimes your pelvis kind of tucks under and pulls forward. And you have that like kind of curled under position in your pelvis. So again, notice the space around your sits bone. What's the space that creates length in your lower back? A sense of your sits bones, easy tailbone. For me, it feels like I'm arching my back a little to do it, but not tensing my back. See what it's like for you. Now, top leg lifts a little bit. We're going to do exactly what you did on your belly. Using your belly, long straight leg. Think of the hamstring, pressing your leg back in line with your body. Maybe a tiny, tiny bit behind, but not letting your pelvis tip forward to do it. Not letting your shoulders come forward to do it. And then we're going to go spacious sits bone, long hamstring, the leg comes forward. Bring them back together, belly, long leg, lengthen into the hamstring behind you. Long, spacious sits bone, forward. And lengthening back. Support from the belly. Find the hamstring. Couple more. And then legs together. All right, let's see what that's like on the other side. So not tucking your pelvis, space around your sits bone, lifting in your abdominals in your center, top leg up in line with your hip. And then, you could just kind of move your pelvis a little bit to feel like, oh yeah, where is it? What was it like sitting? What was it like lying on the back, on the belly? And then long reach in the hamstring to take it in line with your body. And then maybe a tiny bit behind your body. And then let it lengthen forward. Abdominals, hamstring, long back of the knee. Lengthen forward. Reaching back. Bitty Kitten has taken this series very seriously. She's very interested in our feet, ankles, and shins, which we've covered in the last 2 weeks. So she seems to be listening. We'll see if she heads to hamstrings this week. One more. And then legs together. And coming up to sitting. Well, that's about my time. We're going to pass this off to Scott. Let him work a little more with you. I can see him adjusting the camera slightly for taller people.
So hello everybody, and apologies again, maybe you saw the chat, we're having some internet problems, so fingers crossed that we aren't having too many freeze-ups. So let's begin in standing. And then in standing, lengthen your out breath, so it takes a little bit longer. And then slightly deepen your in-breath. So the key term here is slightly. If you do really deep breathing, you would minimum get a little bit lightheaded. But that can also be really agitating for your system. So we're looking for just incremental changes in your breath. Exhale a little bit longer, taking a longer period of time. And inhale slightly more air. So even though our discussion is from the ground up, this time that we have together, get your ribs moving. Feel how your ribs move with the breath. They go down with the out breath. And lift and expand with the in breath. So having done all that good foundation work, let's do a little bit in the upper body. Exhale, arms up. Inhale, arms down. Exhale. Inhale. 2 more. Now with this one, exhale up. Inhale, roll forward. And whether your hands come to the floor, your shins, either way, let your head hang. As you let your head hang, what you're doing is letting the weight of your head decompress your neck, decompress your upper back between your shoulder blades, and decompress your lower back. So maybe you've already felt in your body this elongation in your spine. So build upon that elongation. Exhale, stretch the crown of your head forward. Thoracic extension, a few breaths here. And then step back to head down dog. Head down dog, let's take a few breaths here. And then come down to your hands and knees and all the way down onto your belly. So on your belly, slight variation of the theme you worked on earlier. This time have your hands next to your armpits. And to help tone the muscles that support upper back, neck, and head alignment, float your nose and chin up off the floor. At the same time as you bring your upper chest, your collarbones, down toward the floor. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, can he make up his mind? Those two cues contradict each other. You're absolutely correct. So in your body, find that interface, that happy medium. Bring your collarbones, upper chest ever closer to the floor, while at the same time floating your nose and chin. So let's keep working on the tone and the muscles that support posture in your upper torso. And then bend your left knee. Then all that good work you've done in your hamstring, engage that left hamstring, make a muscle. And the best you can, keep that left hamstring muscle engaged as you now lengthen it, as you slowly straighten that knee. So strength in length. And see if you can keep that hamstring continually engaged as you straighten your knee all the way. Remember how you worked on that before? And now use the tone, the engagement of that hamstring to lift your left leg up a little bit. We'll hold here for a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and lower that left leg down. Push up the hands and knees. And then back to yoga pose, head down dog. You might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what about the right side? Let's take a few moments here. You've done something on one side, not yet the other side. Maybe the two sides of your body feel the same. Quite likely they don't. Let's take a few breaths here and let whatever sensations are present in your body, simply be aware of them, feel them. This really is the essence right here of mindfulness practice. So let's head back down to the floor, down to your belly. Hands adjacent to your armpits. Float your nose and chin up off the floor. As you bring your upper chest down to the floor. Then as you continue strengthening the muscles in your upper torso that support neck and head alignment, now bend your right knee. Engage that right hamstring, make a muscle. And keep that engagement in your right hamstring as you slowly straighten. Strength in length. Best kind of strength. Strength in length. And once that hamstring, that leg is all the way extended, then use the tone of your right hamstring to lift your right leg up a little bit. And we'll hold here for count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And lower that leg down. Come on up to hands and knees. And then back to head down dog. So we've done now both legs. Maybe two sides feel more similar. No expectation, no pressure that they should feel the same. Asymmetry is a normal, natural part of the human body. Now, whether the two sides feel the same or different, use your hamstrings to pull your hips away from your hands. Use the strength of your hamstrings to lengthen your spine. Then a few breaths here. Then exhale, step your feet forward. Here's another chance to lengthen your spine. Inhale, fold. Yet another chance to lengthen your spine. Let's take a few breaths here. And then slowly roll up. And then arms down. So back to ordinary everyday standing. So a little bend in your knees to help support feeling your feet on the floor. And take a moment. See if you can feel your heels, left heel, right heel. The balls of your feet. Left foot, right foot. And then your toes. Let your toes rest. And explore the possibility of feeling each toe, every toe, independently releasing into the floor. Now, if you recall that feeling of engaging your hamstrings with your knees a little bit bent, engage your left hamstring and your right hamstring. If you don't feel that, not to worry. It can be a little bit abstract. Then whether or not you feel your hamstrings engaging, slowly straighten your knees. And to build upon what we did on the floor, or what you did previously with Collette, maybe you're already feeling how engaging your hamstrings connects you into your belly. And from the tone of your lower belly, stand tall. So way back in the day, in yoga, we used to talk about engage the thigh muscles, the quadriceps. Close, but not quite correct. Engage the hamstrings. That's the pathway to support the lift to your spine. In fact, it actually helps release the fronts of your hips and tension in the quadriceps. So via the connection of hamstrings to belly, connect into your belly. Exhale, reach your arms up and out of your belly. Then this time a little bit different. Imagine you're flying. Inhale, long spine, reach up and out of your lower belly. Let your head hang. A few breaths here. Then even here, as you let your head hang, engage your hamstrings. Use your hamstrings as the on-ramp to your belly. And whether or not you feel that, with the next out-breath, reach your head out of your lower belly. Couple breaths here. And then step back. So now that we're in head down dog again, bend your knees quite a bit. As best you can, engage your two hamstrings, left one, right one. Keep those two hamstrings engaged as you slowly straighten. And then use those hamstrings to pull your hips to that wall that's back there behind you. Use your hamstrings to connect to your belly. And use the tone, the support of your belly to release your spine. A equals B, hamstrings equal belly. B equals C, belly equals release your spine. A equals C, engage your hamstrings to release your spine. Full deep inhale here, fill your back. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, fold. Exhale, roll up, mobilize your spine. Inhale, arms down. All right. So standing here, best you can, A equals C. Use your hamstrings to lift your spine. All right. So now let's build upon this. Step your feet wide apart. Turn your left foot in, right foot out. Let's do some mobility work. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Now, next time that knee in the bent position, let's pause there. So then with the next out breath, tip your hips. Now, ordinarily, we either bring hand to knee or elbow to knee. A little bit different today. Bring your hand to your shin. Then to help further elongate your spine, bent leg, engage that hamstring. Keep that hamstring engaged as you lengthen that hamstring. Straighten your knee. Now use both hamstrings, engage both, to lengthen your spine. Just like you'd squeeze a tube of toothpaste, toothpaste comes out. Engage your hamstrings to squirt the top of your head out of your belly. Next exhale, come on up. Turn back to the front. Second side, turn your right foot in, left foot out. Mobility work. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. Couple more. The next time knee in the bent position, pause here. With the next out breath, tip your hips. Bypass hand to knee. Bypass elbow to knee. Hand to shin. So we've talked quite a bit about hamstrings. So now let's take the forthcoming transition quietly together. Engage your hamstrings. Lengthen your knee. Straighten your knee. Then use your hamstrings, left hamstring, right hamstring, to lengthen your spine. Then exhale, come on up. Turn back to the front and step your feet together. A equals B, hamstrings connect to belly. B equals C, belly supports spine. Now let's take a few moments quietly to practice A equals C. Now maybe you already felt as you engage your hamstrings how the fronts of the hips release into lengthening. That's part of the point. That's why this is such an important cue. So out of your belly, exhale, reach your arms up. And then it's your choice. You either be long spine or rounded spine. Come on down. Whichever way you've chosen, let your head hang so we reconvene at rounded spine. Then from here, reach the crown of your head out of your belly. Lengthen your belly. Few breaths. And then step on back. So there's that wall back there. Do you see it? So use your hamstrings to pull your butt toward that wall. And then come on down to your knees and into seated. When seated, let's start with cross legs. Lengthen your belly. Now that is a kind of treacherous cue because in seated, most people lengthen their belly by throwing their ribs forward, trying to lift the front of the rib cage up. Let your lower ribs settle into your belly. Now let your pubic bone drop down out of your navel. And maybe you felt how the lower belly then elongates. Then out of your lower belly, lift the crown of your head up. And let's add a twist into it. Bring your left hand across, right hand behind. Turn to your right. And breathe. Let your pubic bone drop out of your navel, creating a sense that your lower belly elongates. And then up and out of your lower belly, lift. And come on back toward the middle. Root down to lift up. And now bring your right hand across, left hand behind. So drop your pubic bone down to the floor, out of your navel. And out of your lower belly, lift up and out. And breathe as you twist. And come in back toward the middle. All right. So now we're going to sit a little bit longer. I'm going to grab a meditation cushion. I hope you have a chair around. If you have a chair around, I recommend you sit in a chair. It's okay to sit in a chair, the floor, a cushion, whichever allows you to sit upright without working too hard. Maybe you recall last week, we're looking at breathing with your whole rib cage, breathing with all of your lungs. Now I know the idea of belly breathing is quite popular these days. Please keep in mind your lungs aren't in your abdomen. Your lungs are in your thorax. So I've come to use the cue, the image. Breathe where your lungs are. Exhale stale air out of your lungs. Inhale, bring fresh air into your lungs. Breathe where your lungs are. As you continue this deeper breathing, if you get a chance to consult an anatomy book, what you'll find is that a small fraction of the lung tissue is in the chest. The majority of lung tissue is in the back. So continue this thread. Breathe where your lungs are. Fill your upper back with the inhale. Now, it's not to say there is not lung tissue anywhere else. For sure there is. It's just that the lion's share of the lung tissue is across your upper back, almost up to your shoulders. So a few more breaths, using all of your lung capacity. One or two more deep breaths. Remember, you don't want to go through your day doing super deep breathing. It'd be really agitating to your nervous system. Now with this exhale, either summon a kitten or release the deep breathing. Preferably, release the deep breathing. And we'll sit here for a few moments, connecting to your lower belly, and using that support, that tone of your lower abdominals to create the lift up. All right, time flies when you're having fun. So again, apologies if there was technical stuff. Fingers crossed it wasn't too much. We just got fiber, so you'd think that fiber optic would improve our internet. It was actually misbehaving today. So with that note, any comments or questions?
When I engage my hamstrings, my glutes tighten. I can't isolate the hamstrings.
Yeah. So the comment is when engaging the hamstrings, the glutes tighten. So I'm guessing this occurs most frequently on your belly, and that's really common. And for the short term, I'd say not a big problem. Most of us, especially when you're going to lift the legs up and prone, that's going to involve some glute activity. If it's occurring when you're in dog pose, say, for example, or when you're standing upright, it's not that engaging the glutes is bad, but it oftentimes is meaning the hamstrings are still kind of sleepy. So some of the techniques you worked on at the outset with Collette, working with with the imagery or the visualization of the hamstrings may be a good place to start. So they're very close together and in many contexts almost inseparable, but developing the skill set to separate them can be of use for improving your posture.
Breathing where your lungs are still engage the lower belly?
Yeah, breathing where your lungs are, and the question is still engaging your lower belly. So this is a really long answer, and I'll try and do it in less than a minute. So as upright beings, we naturally carry some tone in our lower belly. And then when we breathe, that tone is going to persist. And so naturally, there's always some tone in the belly that occurs with the breathing, up to and including diaphragmatic breathing. Somewhere along the line, people got the idea that to breathe diaphragmatically, you have to do this exaggerated belly thing. And some people actually unlearned the natural baseline tone of their belly. When that is the case, if you've unlearned that natural tone by an emphasis on belly breathing, then you do need to engage your belly when you're breathing, at least for a while until you kind of relearn that natural habit. If you haven't been taught or learned this exaggerated move your belly when you breathe, then no need to engage your belly. It'll just engage naturally because that's a normal, natural part of healthy breathing. Awesome. Thanks so much. And we do this every Saturday, kitten or not. And let's do it again next Saturday. Bye-bye.